Thank you, Reverend Shockley, for the introduction. As he mentioned, my name is Reverend Mary Ferris, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. But the thing I like to be called the most is Grandma. And we welcome all who are here in person. And by the way, in case you think it's a sparse crowd, Jesus only had 11 disciples when he told them to go into all the world and bring the world good news. So combined with our virtual audience, we have enough here to change our world here, and at least here in this part of California. And I hesitate to say Happy New Year when the world seems to be in the same mess it was in 2 days ago. I'm sort of a bah humbug person when it comes to New Year's. I'm more like Ecclesiastics. There's nothing new under the sun. All life is meaningless. But that's at odds with our scripture today. In many ways, our passage today is really the third birth narrative of Christ. And for me, it's the one that puts me and all of us right in the middle of this cosmic creation narrative. Now, our song we sung today, Morning Has Broken, reminds us that each day is a new day. And this pure creative force, this logos, this intelligence is never ending. And that light that streams into the darkness is never ending. And I fervently believe that it was created in Jesus Christ uniquely, that the word became flesh. But unique does not mean exclusive. Yes, there has never been anybody like Christ, and we are here today to follow his examples. But that word can become flesh in each of us uniquely. Western civilization measures time in a linear fashion, past, present, future, but that's not reality, and it's not the way the church celebrates. The church celebrates time in the church year, in a cycle. Advent, Christmas, Lent, Easter, Pentecost, great green growing season was what we call the kids when we use the green paramounts. And then back to Advent. And each time you make this circle, you put in new memories, but you bring the past with you. Every moment, even right now, is a culmination of the past, and that past sows the seeds for the future. So in some ways, we discover the future from our past. Now to my past. Growing up in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas in the 50s, my family lived the typical Leave It to Beaver life in white privilege. Now, I want to say something about white privilege. White privilege does not mean racism, white supremacy. Doesn't mean you're a card-carrying Ku Klux Klanner, but it does mean you have a get-out-of-jail-free card. It does mean that you can drive around with an air freshener on your rear view mirror and not be pulled out of your car and shot to death. It also means that if you're a little white boy, you can play in the park with a toy gun and not be shot. It means that if you're a black young man wearing a hoodie, you can go in. If you're a white young man, you can go in a convenience store with a hoodie and buy a pack of Skittles. Conversely, how many young black men have been mass shooters with AK-47s given to them by their parents? Zero. I am much more afraid of that disturbed white boy with an AK-47 than I am with any young person of color wearing a hoodie. Now, I'm not ashamed to be white, but I can't change that. I am who I am, and each of us is. But we have to be aware that this world is not always fair. Now, as I mentioned, my parents grew up, raised us as Presbyterians, and they're very, very involved in the church. And one day in 1955 or 56, right after the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus the Board of Education, we were watching TV and they were harassing these little children trying to go to school. I can't remember exactly, on horseback or with whips. I don't remember, but my dad became so incensed. He picked up a can of peaches, threw it across the room, and he says, "This has got to stop now." And then my dad drug us all into a new reality. He was relentless in trying to always point out where he would go into the park and they would have two drinking fountains and he'd switch the signs. I mean, it was a daily thing. And so, as I said, they were very religious, and I wanted to be a foreign missionary. That's what I always wanted to be. And I'd baptize my dolls and all this. My dad said, "Mary, you don't have to be a foreign missionary. Each of us is a missionary. And the world is dark enough right here. We have plenty of work to do here. So you don't have to go anywhere else." And I always do remember that. Turning point, many of the actions that both my parents took real courage. And I didn't realize this at the time, but my mother would say, "You're going to get us bombed." But I remember one very, very sinister time when the first time I ever came face to face with real hatred and ugliness. It happened on a camping trip. Our family had taken to a nearby lake with another family. And we were all swimming in this, the public swimming area, and up drives this, and there was a lot of people there, and up drives this pickup with the two gun racks, and these two burly guys get out and they go, "Hey, using the N word, you get out of here." Well, my dad rose from the water, all 90-pound weaklings of himself. He was 6 feet tall, skinny. He was so white that you'd have to wear sunglasses, pasty. And even when he puffed his chest out, it wasn't puffed. And I was always embarrassed because he had these baggy swim shorts that, his little spindly legs are coming out. And he puffs up, and he goes up to these guys. He says, "Who says?" And they go, "Well, they puffed up too." "We do." Well, the friend that was with us, the man that was with us says, he tells the story later. He says, "I was scared. My feet were pointing the other way. And I wanted to get out of there. But there was Dave standing there. And he says, I couldn't leave him there alone." So he says, "I puffed up too, and my knees were shaking, and I went and I stood next to him." Dave said, that's my dad. He says, "You don't have to go through me first." And my dad can snarl like you cannot. I've seen that snarl so many times. "You have to go through me first." And there was this, they snarled too. And then they said, "Oh," and they turned around and went away. Now that took courage, and that was the Word made flesh in David Creed at that moment. My dad, the darkness will never overcome the light. Now let's fast forward 50 years. After 25 years of youth ministry in various capacities and many up and down life adventures, we don't have time to hear them all, of course, that little girl who dreamed of being a foreign missionary arrived on August 11th in Tulcea, Romania, as a Presbyterian mission co-worker for children and youth. And I was assigned to work with abandoned children in this one county, there's 22 state-run orphanages. Now, and there's 40 counties in Romania. And you want to know how come there's so many children abandoned? Taxes. Start building orphanages, because when you tell people there was all forms of birth control was outlawed, all forms of abortion. They even monitored women every month. And if you were pregnant, they watched you, and your neighbors would turn you in for a loaf of bread. So we better start building these orphanages around Because what happens when the women have the babies, they would walk out and leave them in the hospital. And so that's going to be a bad outcome if we don't take a lesson from history. Well, my focus was to work with the older youth, helping to prepare them for independent lives after they had been discharged from the child protection system. I arrived without a job description because they said, well, spend a few months and, get the lay of the land and see what needs to be done. Well, the first day I was there, the headline on the newspaper said, 50% of the girls that leave the child protection system go into prostitution. I didn't believe it, but it didn't take me long to realize that was true. The pimps on Sunday afternoon would surround the orphanage, giving the girls cigarettes, giving them a little booze. There was only like one adult worker on staff for the whole orphanage. And there's all these different orphanages, right? So we decided that we needed to organize, and I say we, I mean the staff of Noroc, all Romanians. I was the only American there. And I'm really good at getting everybody else to work, so beware. So we organized all the kids into these small groups. And each group had we call him a big-hearted friend, older adult who would shepherd these small groups, just like a youth group here that you have here, where you check in with them every week. And I had one group, I called them my bad girl wannabes. These were 7th grade girls, and they dressed for their future occupation. And so what we did was on every Sunday afternoon, we would do something with them. Now, can we get the slide of the river? Okay, now Tulcha, where I landed, see where it's circled there? Tulcha is at the very end of the Danube River, just as it goes into the Black Sea. Tulcha is Agassiz by the sea in Homer's Odyssey. Tulcha is a gateway to the most beautiful bird sanctuary in the world. There's 3 branches of the Danube. The Danube River breaks into 3 branches, and they all empty into the Black Sea. And also around Tulcha is 36, in 10 miles, there's 36 ancient Christian martyr graves. Can we have the next slide of Romania? You can see where the Danube makes the eastern border. And the present day Romania is bordered by Bulgaria and the Ukraine. But back then there was no borders, right? But the Romans would enter the Danube, and they protected it every 30 miles, there was a Roman fort. And so you might ask, how come there's so many Christian martyrs? Well, it was, the legend goes that St. Andrew, Peter's brother, first disciple called by Jesus, that at 80 years old, anybody thinking they're going to retire from ministry? At 80 years old, the legend goes that he came to the mouth of the river, and right there in that circle there, he went to the Roman forts, and they didn't have the Bible back then, but they were preaching love and kindness. And we need to learn from them, because they would go, and the ordinary soldiers were far from home, and they were lonely, and they were hungry, so they would feed them, they would give them health care, they would just love the soldiers. And the early Christians were all pacifist. So they would say, look, there's another way. They used to call Christianity the way. I like that better, actually. But anyway, they'd say, there's a new way, there's another way. You don't have to fight, come join us. Well, they started doing it en masse. There was an explosion of Christianity in the latter parts of the first century. When Jesus said, go into all the world, they did. And they went to Ethiopia and Turkey and Greece. And this part of Romania was called Dobruja. It's also called Scythia Minor, and it's even mentioned in the book of Ecclesiastes as having a church there. So we know that there was Christianity had exploded in this whole region. So in the so we have this Tulsa has the most amazing archaeological sites everywhere. So it's a great place to take kids. You know, you crawl around the ruins and everything. And so one Sunday afternoon, I took can we go back to the tomb? One Sunday afternoon, this is just 10 miles from where I lived. We went to this, it's called the Martyrs' Tomb. And it is the best preserved crypt. I should say qualified, one of the best, because there's probably somebody somewhere else, but preserved martyrs' crypts. And it's from around 275 AD. There were two great persecutions of Christians by the Romans. You can see why the Romans wanted to wipe them out, because people were defecting from the army, right, left, and center. So there's two mass persecutions. And this tomb was discovered in 1971, just like it is. When the rain washed away the road, and there was this crypt. And there's a little tombstone right there, you can see inside. It says, here and there lie the blood of the martyrs. And inside are two levels. On the first level were 4 skeletons with their heads severed. Intact. I mean, complete skeletons with their heads severed. On the bottom, there were 11 skeletons, but we don't know who they were. On the top level, those 4, their names are carved in the wall. Those same names are in the Vatican as being martyrs. They're listed, and it tells how they died. Guess how they died? Preaching the good news to the Romans. And this is around 275. On the other wall, in case you didn't get that these are Christian martyrs, was the sign of the fish. And another wall, they used to carve everything in stone, so that, you know. And another wall, the back wall, was the sign of the cross. So I took my wannabes there, my big bad girl wannabes, and they became fascinated, and we all decided we wanted to go find the Roman fort, which was right in the next town. So as we're driving, and the Roman fort is called Novidum, for any history buff, and it's under archaeological digging right now, and explorations, right. So anyway, so we wanted to go to the ruins, and as we're driving, my boss sees a priest in the courtyard of the church. And he knows it because my boss knows everybody. He's an English professor, and he taught everybody in the whole city of Tulsa English that ever learned English. So he stopped to talk to the priest, and the priest, who was very excited, he said, I have something I want to show you. So he lets us all into the courtyard. And now I have to pause right here and tell you about the architecture of every single Orthodox church. It's like here, you have the foyer, then you have the main sanctuary, but then right here, from here all the way to the ceiling, is an iconostasis. It's a whole wall of icons. And there is an icon for every single story in the Bible, from creation all the way through Revelation. At the top of the iconostasis are the 10 Commandments that all these stories are built upon. This is sort of like a Sunday school pictures, but they're gorgeous, the iconostasis. And then right here, this would be called the altar. And there are 2 doors, and only men can go behind the iconostasis. No women are allowed. That's another long story why, but So the priest, there's a back door right there. So the priest took us all the wannabes. He let the men go inside, but all the wannabes and me and our group leader, we went to the back. And he opened the back door and he had each of us stand right, no, I don't want to fall down, right to the edge of the door. And we could lean forward as far as we could. And the others would hold our arms so you could get way in there, but your feet couldn't cross. And what was there? It was a stone communion table. And it had carved in it, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. We love Emperor Diocletian and we pray for him daily. This was the emperor that was martyred, cutting their heads off. This was from about, it had to be between 300 and 311, something in there, because at 313, Constantine made Christianity the official religion. If you can't beat them, join them, right? So the early Christians, they didn't have the Bible, so this must have been their way of life, to love your enemies. We're going to take communion today. I want to ask you, whose name would be carved today? Donald Trump? Joe Biden? Marjorie Taylor Greene? My favorite, Ted Cruz? But you might say the Squad. Well, we can't get to those people directly, but we can love those people who love them. We all have family members, friends who, I love your sermon the other day when you talked about the disciples of Trump. That for them, he is their savior. So we can get to the power, the Roman emperor, only through love, the people we love. And love takes courage. It's not a wimpy thing, as you know. So our challenge today is to, after we take our communion, is to go out into this world. I know that Pastor Shockley has his sights on that high school across the street. But wherever we are, be that light, be that word made flesh. You don't have to do anything different, but just be that witness that when the time comes, you'll say enough is enough. We never know when we're called to do that. And by the way, not one of my wannabes became a prostitute.